And I feel like for Ichiro, like he can't let that happen. He's coming in the league. He doesn't have the intention to just be a contributor. Like he's going to end up winning the MVP and the Rookie of the Year. He has to make a statement. He can't let someone run on third. I mean, it's just disrespectful, right? He has to at least make an attempt. And so he throws him out, and he just kind of turns around very nonchalantly.
It's April 2001, Mariners at A's. This is Remember That Game, the podcast about sporting events that take you on a journey and maybe chart the path of the zeitgeist. I'm your host, Thomas Emerick, and returning to the program is Ray Delahanty, or CityNerd on Nebula, YouTube, Patreon. Ray's last episode here on the pleasantly contentious relationship between the Pac Northwest and California, both in sports and urbanism ethos. In the Remember That Game feed, it's the 1987 Raiders-Seahawks game. Bo Jackson goes up the coast to the Kingdom. Here in 2001, Seattle heads down south to Oakland for the second of two series out the gate against the consensus AL West favorite, the Athletics. Post Y2K, the Mariners are dead, the 90s got away, it's over, welcome to 500 baseball, and the A's are ascendant. They got friggin' Brad Pitt. How are you feeling about what the Mariners got?
Yeah, there's definitely a sense in the AL West at this point that the A's are the team on the rise, right? They've got, I think at this point, they have a big three in Tim Hudson, Mark Mulder, and Barry Zito, and they're all just dominating pitchers. And I feel like, as we'll find out later, I think Michael Lewis, they published Moneyball in 2003, so you start to get a sense of what was going on behind the scenes in the front office to put together the kind of success the A's were having. And with the Mariners, it kind of felt like the opposite story at that point, where we had almost been gifted just generational players, players, first ballot Hall of Famers, Randy Johnson, Ken Griffey Jr., Alex Rodriguez, all on the same roster for a brief period, never got to the World Series. And then all those players were gone. Alex Rodriguez left at the end of 2000. And, we were kind of putting together some different pieces. We'd gotten some good pieces back in the Randy Johnson trade, but it is hard to fill a void that a player like Alex Rodriguez leaves behind. And so yeah, there's the sense that maybe this is the A's time. Although coming into this game, the Mariners have gotten off to a pretty hot start on the season, and the A's have struggled a little bit. So maybe you have like a little glimmer of hope at this point.
A glimmer of hope that comes over from Japan after following Kasasaki from the year earlier. Suzuki always wanted to play with Ken Griffey, but there's a rule between the MLB and the Japan Pro Leagues where he had to wait a certain amount of time. What was Ichiro Suzuki showing you leading up? How high were your hopes building heading into this one?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm someone who it's hard to. I'm pretty conservative about my expectations, and it's hard to move me off of my like initial priors or assumptions about how things are going to be. And so like I had pretty conservative hopes for what Ichiro could be in Major League Baseball. Obviously put up incredible numbers in Japan. And then, just a question of, it's just interesting. There had been several Japanese pitchers who had come over, like Hideo Nomo, like Shigetoshi Hasegawa, Hideki Arabu, a few others, but there hadn't been any Japanese position players at all. So you'd seen some Japanese pitchers have some success in the major leagues, but I don't know. There's a lot more, I think, skepticism around. Yeah, can a position player, especially a guy who looks like Ichiro looks, he looks like he's kind of, I don't know, I want to say skinny and scrawny, because the reality is he's a professional athlete. He's a high performance human being. But just to the naked eye, compared to, and this is an age where, I think this is the year Barry Bonds hit 73 home runs. Right, we're deep in the performance enhancing drugs age right now, and so by that standard, Ichiro looks like a pretty little guy. And so, your expectations about what he can really contribute and how much he can really impact the Mariners' success, at least for me, it's pretty guarded. He gets off to a pretty good start. I think he's hitting like 350 coming into this game, but he's kind of a slap hitter. I think he's got like a home run and like a double, but he's mostly going to be a singles hitter. But I think what's starting to become apparent is he has this extremely dynamic effect on what the Mariners can do, just in his uncanny ability to like beat out infield singles, for example. And then once he gets on base, I think he steals 50 bases at least this year. Once he gets on base, occupying the pitcher's attention and creating opportunities for hit and runs and straight steals and all that. And so you're starting to get a sense. But again, like coming into it, my forecast is pretty conservative, and it's kind of hard to get me off that. But I'm going to warm up as the year goes along, and I definitely warm up in the in the eighth inning of this game.
Seattle's a city. You get to the 2000s and nothing happened with the Kemp Payton teams for the Sonics. Kemp's gone by then. Sonics are still in town, but Seattle, tucked away in the Pacific Northwest, is having some trouble keeping players. How much did Seattle, as a sports town and as a city, need the Mariners would have in 2001?
Still am a big Sonics fan, and bring back the Sonics. I'm very much in the bring back the Sonics camp. The George Karl tenure ends in like 1998, I think. Kemp gets traded for Vin Baker. Eventually, I forget when we lose Gary Payton, but yeah, that whole era of success for the Sonics, where they make an appearance in the NBA Finals against the 72-win Bulls and give them a pretty good series, actually. But then, they never reached that height again at any point before they moved to Oklahoma City. And then the Seahawks are kind of in the doldrums. Like they've snuck into the playoffs a couple times in the last 15 years or so with like 9 wins. I don't think they win 10 games again. I think they win 10 games in like 1986. And then I don't know when they win 10 games again. Maybe like 2004 or 2005, because they do eventually go to the Super Bowl in like 06, I think, and lose to Pittsburgh. But yeah, so it's really kind of a down period for the Sonics and the Seahawks, definitely. And then there's also the sense that that's kind of the trajectory for the Mariners. We lost our generational first ballot Hall of Fame type players, and yeah, there's a lot of spirit there. And we like the players we have. They're generally good guys or whatever, but they're probably not going to take us to any sort of glorious season or postseason success, and a sense that we probably will not get back to the heights achieved by. I think we get to the ALCS the previous year in Alex Rodriguez's last year, and then in '95, of course. But there's a sense that we're not gonna get back to that point.
2000 offseason, after A-Rod was named Player of the Year by Baseball America, led the Mariners to the brink of the World Series. They lose to the Yankees in 2000, the ALCS. But then A-Rod says he wants to play for a team that can contend, and then joins the Rangers, who had just basically missed their window from the night. Almost all their best players in the 90s are gone.
Well, everything about that was so maddening, right? I mean, it's one thing for a guy like that to leave in free agency, but it's another one to have him, like, I don't know, like from a Mariner fan's point of view, it's like, this guy couldn't be any more all about the money than this, because he goes to a bad team. He eats up all their payroll so they can't put any pieces around him. And then the team is bad. He puts up great numbers. He's a great fantasy player, but he's terrible. I mean, I don't know, his team is terrible. So anyway.
Even ESPN's like Quants put out their projected win totals, and even with A-Rod, they're not projecting the Rangers to do that well. The Mariners, they have as a decent team, I think it was around like 85, 86 wins. Spoiler alert, they'll go on to win 116, by far the biggest undershot they had. I think the next closest was, the undershot like the Twins and David Ortiz, maybe by like 20 wins. Complete outlier of expectations versus the eventual reality with this Mariners team. And it comes with some of these pieces that might have made our Mariners fans feel down and out. They traded in '98, they trade midseason Randy Johnson, and 99, 2000, he wins the Cy Young. So you're coming off that. But in that trade, you do get Freddie Garcia, who'll make we'll get to the All-Star game in Seattle. Carlos Guillen in that trade as well, part of another key piece in one of the best fielding teams in baseball. And then in the Ken Griffey trade before 2000, they get Mike Cameron back, who's also going to win a couple Gold Gloves and be a valuable piece at a fraction of the cost. A-Rod also kind of, funnily enough, so he's in the Rangers this season, but later on, he tried to make amends to Seattleites by buying the Timberwolves and like floating rumors he's going to bring them back to Seattle. Did you believe that was more than?
I give him no credit.
So yeah, this is a chip on the shoulder kind of season. You go into this evening, April 11th, game 8 of the season at Oakland Alameda Coliseum. I don't care what brand may have had it around then. Oakland Alameda to me, and all that space to get under pop flies and foul territory. How well do you think the A's and Mariners played to their respective parks as they went against the grain a lot and what seemed to be to make successful baseball at that time with all that power hitting and star power and whatnot?
This is kind of the entering the first stage of like internet fantasy baseball, and I was very much into that. So I was way into all the things like park effects. And knowing how much better is a player going to be playing in Coors Field than they are at Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. So I was well aware of kind of the how much of a pitcher's park Oakland was, and yeah, like it's one of these old multi-purpose circular stadiums where, and the Kingdom was like this too, but for whatever reason, a lot of stadiums like that had temporary seating configurations they could bring in for baseball games that brought seating in closer to the first and third baselines, and Oakland just didn't have that. Instead, they just had these huge arcs of artificial turf, where a lot of foul balls that might have reached the stands in any other stadium remained in play, and so pitchers got extra outs. Plus, I think the outfield fences were on the deep side there too. So yeah, and the Kingdom was notoriously a hitter's park because the outfield fences were somewhat closer. And then they moved to Safeco after that, and that was more of a pitcher's park. Again, it's all about the field dimensions, and maybe a little bit of effect from the non-climate controlled air, maybe made the ball like slightly heavier or something like that. So yeah, I don't know how much the front offices, how much time they spent trying to craft personnel around what the characteristics of the ballpark was. There's probably a certain amount of that. And I think at this time, the Mariners are like a lot of their success is attributed to how strong the pitching is up and down the rotation, and Sasaki coming out of the bullpen, and Arthur Rhodes, and I mean they just had a strong pitching staff up and down, and that they had pretty solid defensive players in the infield. But I always wonder with that, it's like, did they go get good defensive players because they wanted to be a defensive team, or does the park make them look better than they actually are because it's a pitcher's park? So I guess I don't know the answer to that question, but I've always been fascinated by the park effects, because it's really a unique thing about baseball. Every other sport, well, soccer maybe a little bit, the field dimension can vary, but with baseball, every park is a little bit different, and that's part of the, I don't know, like if you like baseball, that's part of the charm of the game.
Good pitching staff for the Mariners. In this game, it's going to be a 0-0 shutout through 7 innings. We mentioned, Brad Pitt, plays Billy Beane, the Athletics general manager in Moneyball. The end of this season is the beginning of that film. They lose to the Yankees in heartbreaking fashion in the ALDS. The Yankees go on to play the Mariners in the ALCS, which we'll eventually get to. Brad Pitt's talking about how we have to recreate Jason Giambi in the aggregate. Well, right here, 7th inning, Jason Giambi struck out looking against Aaron Seeley, and they probably played pretty well to that architecture. Both teams did. The Mariners got rid of their 60s, 70s style architecture when they blew up the Kingdom. A's ride it out. In the early 2000s, the pitching staff, Hudson Mulder, who starts this game, 2-hit game and no decision to show for it, and Barry Zito. They make that work then, but eventually looking for a new park. It looks like they're going to leave Oakland. The new Vegas park will probably have better sightlines, I imagine, but are they set up for success on getting people door to door conveniently?
Uh, the answer is no. And it's a shame because Vegas is such a so it's not a large market in terms of population. It's growing. Vegas, over like the past 40 or 50 years, I think it was like the fastest growing large metro area in the U.S. I don't know if that's true at this point, but it's still, I think it's like 2.5 million. It's like it's about the size of like Portland probably, or it's probably a little bit bigger than Portland now, but it's not one of the larger markets. It's like kind of like a Kansas City, like Cincinnati size of market. But and I think this is true for because the Raiders moved from Oakland to Vegas, and the Raiders sell. I believe they sell out all the games, and not only do they sell them out, but I think they have the highest ticket revenue in the whole NFL. And so I think that includes like much bigger market teams and much more popular teams. And the reason is that it because I lived in Vegas for a year, and so on weekends when there were Raiders home games, you get tons of whatever the opposing team is in town. There's a ton of people walking around in Broncos gear, or a ton of people in Chargers gear, or whatever the visiting team is, because Vegas is such a, I don't know, like it depends what you're into, obviously, but it's an extremely popular place to come on a road trip to come watch your team play. And I would very much expect that to be the case for the A's as well. If they remain the A's, I would assume they would. I mean, they took that from Philadelphia when they came over, right? And yeah, so very popular to come out of town and watch like a 3-game set when your team's in Vegas. So I expect them to be a very high revenue team with lots of sellouts. The problem is the transportation to get from like all the hotels on the strip to and the stadium is supposed to be at that they're actually I think they're in the middle of demolishing the Tropicana right now, which is at the southeast corner of Tropicana and the strip. There's not a great transit system on this corridor that is like one of the busiest corridors in the whole US, as far as like how many people visit it and how many jobs there are and how many attractions there are. So yeah, there isn't like, there isn't even like light rail or whatever. There's a bus that operates in mixed traffic, and then there's a monorail that runs behind like the properties on the east side of the strip, but it doesn't get you all the way to the Tropicana. And by the time the A's show up, like I'm hearing that they're going to dismantle the monorail by like 2028 or 2029, because it's just kind of like a white elephant. Like it doesn't generate the ridership to cover like operating costs or whatever. And so the convention authority is gonna rip it out. So there's not even gonna be that, I think, by the time the A's get to Vegas. So anyway, yeah, my great wish is they would build like an elevated train or a subway just underneath the strip between downtown and the airport, and eventually to the high speed rail station, the Brightline station, that's going to be a little bit further south. But there's no, I don't know. I don't think they're anywhere near contemplating doing something like that, even though they should. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
They're in the same division with the Angels. They would potentially be able to take high-speed rail to the away games in Vegas and then vice versa. Do you think teams moving or potential divisional realignments could be like intertwined with business incentives for owners to like get behind something like intercity high-speed rail, especially for filling seats in regular season baseball games?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. Well, with baseball especially, it's complicated just because unlike our other major sports, which are all aligned geographically, in baseball you still have the old American League, National League, which they play more interleague games than ever now. I think you play everybody now. You play like a 3-game set against everybody in the opposite league, which, for almost the entire history of baseball, there was no interleague play at all. And and each of the leagues has its own like West, Central, East, and so like the Dodgers and the Angels like wouldn't used to be they wouldn't play each other at all. Now I think they get 4 games because they're like natural rivals or whatever. So that kind of inhibits the value a little bit for the geographic connections. As far as owners wanting to put money in it, I don't know. That's not usually the way they approach stadium financing. They're usually looking for the public to pay as much as possible. What is it? What's the saying? Socialize the risks and privatize the profits,
Right.
or something like that. Although I don't want to be that cynical about it, but
Or at least like throw some political will behind it if they don't have
yeah,
to put another cent behind it.
yeah. I would just say, like, as someone who actually worked in like transportation, I worked on as a consultant. I worked a little bit on early studies for the Cascadia high speed rail, the Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, and Microsoft puts a lot of money into that. So there is precedent for corporations and private interests actually supporting high speed rail, but they have to be convinced, or they have to have convinced themselves somehow that there's a lot of benefit in it for them as far as interregional connectivity and the ability to have like key employees, like I don't know, facilitate either the commutes or the interregional business to nearby cities. So Microsoft obviously has seen a lot of value in that. Would baseball team owners? I think it just depends on, I don't know. It probably depends honestly on like the politics of the actual individual who is making the decisions.
Check out Ray's video on 56 most optimal intercity high-speed rail pairings. Coming in at number 7 and number 1 in the Sun Belt was Houston to Dallas. I know there's a proposal out there, and they're now both in the AL West, unlike back in 2001. It seems like there's an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Houston, Dallas isn't. I think that's a slam dunk. I know people would disagree with that for certain reasons, but from the standpoint of like the populations and growth trajectories of those cities and the distance they are apart, like high speed rail is going to be more than competitive with other travel options between those two cities. So that's great for Rangers Astros series. What they met in the ALCS last year, right?
Yeah.
I was actually down in Houston for the beginning of that, and it was wild. I mean, that's a huge rivalry because they play in the same division. It would be good for Texans Cowboys games, Mavericks Rockets, whatever. And then yeah, like the Northeast corridor, obviously. I mean, already I think like the Sixers were taking the train up to New York for their first round series in the NBA playoffs this year. And it's actually fairly common, I think, particularly for Philadelphia and New York teams to use the train to make that trip, just because like it's much more competitive compared to like highway, or like flying barely makes sense because it's such a short flight. But really true for like, you could have depending on the way you aligned divisions, you could have like an Acela division, or like an Acela North division and an Acela South division with like the Red Sox, Mets, Yankees, and Phillies in one, and then like the Orioles and then Nationals, and then you could extend it south, include the Braves, and really there should probably be a team in North Carolina at this point, but I don't know. I'm not going to go that far. So you could definitely do like a whole, like a couple divisions of high speed rail right there.
Folks should check out the vignettes he does from different cities that are awesome, and some of his speaking engagements tonight, May 22nd, and when this comes out in Albuquerque, Better Towns ABQ, hosting the moderated Q&A and gathering for folks who like convenient, affordable living and transportation, an evening with CityNerd. So Albuquerque, I know they have a minor league team there. How's Albuquerque as like a AAA baseball town, and what cities might be ready for the big show? I know you also have a relocation video this week as well.
Yeah, probably drop the day it's getting released, so people can go check it out. I'm not done writing it yet, so I can't tell you exactly. Well, I don't want to give you spoilers anyway. Yeah. But in terms of I mean, I went to it's the Isotopes. They're the AAA affiliate of the Rockies. I went to a game last week. I think it's fun. I don't know. I love minor league baseball games. I just think I like baseball games, period. But minor league baseball games are, they're much more affordable. Like the food and drink isn't necessarily more affordable, but to get in the door and get a great seat, it's like $20. You can be sitting like 5 rows deep, just off home plate. It's pretty ridiculous. I went to the Aviators. They used to be the 51s in Las Vegas. I went to one of their games when I was living in Vegas the year before. They'll have the A's eventually, but that's a fun place to go to a game too. I'm going to Durham next month, I think. So I'm gonna go see the Durham Bulls, which is a kind of like a bucket list classic one. Yeah, Albuquerque is a great. It's a great like second tier town. I don't know if it ever if it ever rises to the level of hosting any kind of major league team. But don't get me started on like the lack of promotion and relegation in American sports, especially soccer, because you know if New Mexico United, which is very popular here, it's a USL championship team, if they ever actually got good and finished in the top two of the USL championship, if we had promotion and relegation, then they get promoted to Major League Soccer at that point. But we don't have that system here, which I will talk about in the video that is probably dropping on the day this podcast gets released.
Folks should check out Ray's video on how the Midwest used to have the nuts and bolts for rail, or it has the nuts and bolts and used to have rail between cities. You used to be able to go direct from like Detroit to Cleveland. The 2001 AL All-Star break features Ichiro and more Yankees than Mariners by 7-6 margin over the Seattle Mariners. Did it feel like you were jockeying at a certain point more with them?
Yeah, and I can't remember because Seattle hosts the All-Star game this year, and I feel like the fans, because of how well the season is going leading up to the All-Star break, like I think they entered the All-Star break like 35 or 40 games over 5. I mean, they're already having a ridiculous season as the All-Star break approaches, and so there's fan voting, and I think the fans kind of maybe rightfully flood the ballot box with with all their favorite Mariners starters. But yeah, then so is Joe Torre the manager, and he loads up the bench with the Yankees, right? Because he gets to choose the bench players. And so yeah, I don't know. My sense is always the Yankees are like the final boss, right? And that was true. I mean, famously, I guess, that the Mariners beat them. They come back from down 2-0 to beat them 3-2 in kind of the 95 run that sort of saves the franchise, honestly. But then I think they lose to the Yankees in the ALCS coming into this year, so 2000. And the Yankees are always at least the A's are like a small market, low budget team, right? And so you still dislike them because they're your rivals, but at least you have like a grudging admiration for what they're putting together. You never have that with the Yankees because like they always have the biggest budget. They always just go sign the biggest players. They'll eventually sign A-Rod themselves, right? And just put him at third base next to Jeter, right? Like what other team can do that? So you don't really respect that. It's like, yeah, they should freaking win the World Series every year if they spend that much money. And so yeah, you definitely feel like that's the nemesis. Now for Oakland, right? They win 102 games this year. 102 games, which almost always wins you the division and often gets you the top seed, so you have home field advantage if you get to the ALCS. That gets them they finished 14 games behind the Mariners with 102 wins. And I don't know, like so I always think of like an alternate universe where Major League Baseball is set up like, I don't know, the English Premier League, where there's not only promotion relegation, but there aren't any playoffs. Whoever has the best record is the champion. That's it. They have like a side tournament. They have like the FA Cup, and you see that a little bit in American sports now because like the NBA has has the in-season tournament, and I think there's a U.S. Open Cup in American soccer, but there's nothing like that in baseball or football. And it's just I don't know. It's kind of absurd because baseball in particular, you play 162 games. You play this huge sample size of games to determine like who the best team is. And then you kind of throw it all out and you seed teams, and maybe you get home field and maybe you don't. But then like the records don't matter at that point. It's just whoever wins like a 7 game series. And I love playoffs. Like I'm glued to the NBA playoffs right now, because the games are so much more dramatic and intense than the regular season games. But that's kind of a function of the fact that the regular season games don't really matter. In the NBA, people are doing like load management all season long. So a lot of times, like the best players aren't even playing. They're keeping their bodies in shape so that they'll be healthy when the games that matter roll around. And in any European soccer league, it's the regular season games that matter. There are no playoffs. You have to win the big game against your rivals so that you can get the 3 points out of it and they get 0, and then you're on top. And we're gonna get that. It'll be over by the time this goes to air, but on Sunday is the final day of the Premier League season. So if Manchester City wins their game, they're going to be the champions, and if they stumble, then it's probably Arsenal. But all that was determined. Those teams had opportunities all year long um, to beat their rivals and rise to the top. And in American sports, like it kind of doesn't matter. Like you're just playing for seeding in the postseason. So anyway, a long way of saying there's an alternate history of baseball where the 2001 Mariners are the best team that ever played because they won 116 games. Maybe there was the Cubs 116 or the White Sox, I can't remember who, back in like the dead ball era practically. But other than that, it's the Mariners. They won 116 games. Nobody's been able to top that. Anyway, that's my rant about the structure of the American sports system, which I enjoy. Like I enjoy the heck out of the playoffs, but not everybody does it that way.
They're chasing a pace with the 98 Yankees for, as you mentioned, the AL wins record. And yeah, Joe Torre happens to be manager of the All-Star team in Seattle that year. Picks more Yankees and Mariners. They leave Aaron Seeley off so that the Yankees could have 2 relievers on, not just Mariano Rivera, but also Mike Stanton. But at the very least, Ichiro Suzuki gets on the team. Really, his announcement was this game number 8, 2001, April 11th. CAs, they're going to win, 102 games, but 1-5 in April against the Mariners. They get a single to right field. Suzuki had just pinch hit and actually scored a run, helped them get the 3-0 lead. And then 8th inning, Suzuki gets the grounder in the right field. What did it do to your view of what could be that season when you see Suzuki throw that rope from right field to get Terrence Long out at third?
Yeah, I mean, just the 8th inning here is kind of a microcosm of what's going on with the Mariners this year. And again, like this is way early in the season. We don't really know yet, but he pinch hits to lead off the 8th. He hits a bloop single into left. He the pitcher starts throwing over to first. He attempts a steal on like a foul ball. And then he goes first to third on a hit and run. I think Mark McLemore is the batter. And then he scores on, and that then McLemore hits like a chopper through the left side. And I think Eric Chavez, the A's third baseman, is playing way in for a bunt. So like he's already having this huge dynamic effect that creates the first run. He crosses the plate to get the first run. They eventually score 3 runs in the inning, including I think the capper is a Brett Boone double, and Brett Boone is like a whole different story in this season. He has a monster season, almost certainly performance enhanced in retrospect. But yeah. So they take a 3-0 lead in the top half of the first, and Ichiro's or the 8th, and Ichiro's at the center of it, and then. Yeah, and then in the bottom half, the A's get something going with Terrence Long leading off with a single. Yeah, and then there's a single into right field. It's pretty sharply hit, but I think Ichiro's deep. It's not like Terrence Long is going on the pitch, but he decides to round and go for third. which I think, and if you watch the broadcast, Joe Morgan um, is 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 um, is on the broadcast team as he was for a long time on the ESPN broadcast. I mean, he ultimately lambastes Terrence Long for even thinking about going to third just because of the situation, the game being down 3-0 and needing the runs. And so Terrence Long is thinking there's no way this string bean dude from Japan out in right field can throw me out at third on this play. Like, I'm too fast. He probably won't even try to throw it, and he's playing too deep. And Ichiro charged the ball. He gloves it cleanly, and kind of in one motion he throws. I think like it's kind of apocryphal that the ball never gets more than 6 feet off the ground. I think the laws of physics
Yeah,
would say that if that was true, then he just threw the ball like 150 miles per hour or something like that. But he throws a literal, and I want to say literal, strike to third base because they have a camera angle that from behind third base that shows him throwing like a four seamer that's got some good cut on it that basically cross like if it gets to the bag, like it's going to hit the bag, right? And it's like right at knee high, perfect height for the, I think it's David Bell at third base to field and just tag Long cleanly. And I feel like for Ichiro, like he can't let that happen. He's coming in the league. He doesn't have the intention to just be a contributor. Like, he's going to end up winning the MVP and the Rookie of the Year. He has to make a statement. He can't let someone run on third. I mean, it's just disrespectful, right? He has to at least make an attempt. And so he throws him out, and he just kind of turns around very nonchalantly as if it was no big deal. And I just kind of wonder, in his mind, was he thinking, yeah, like I probably can't make that throw every time. I probably got like a little bit lucky. Like, sometimes you just can't control if the ball goes offline or
yeah.
whatever. But he can't act like there was any luck in that at all. And maybe there wasn't in his mind. Maybe there wasn't, and maybe there wasn't. Maybe he's just that good. But yeah, like he had to shut that down right away. And say, yeah, I'm going. You can't just run on me unchecked. I'm gonna make this throw, and like that throw gets replayed all the time. That's one of his great highlights, and it probably stuck in like every major league player's head. Everybody saw that, and so that's in your head now when you think about running on him. And it's like what his sixth, seventh game as a professional major league player. So I don't know, just really an astounding thing. And you can, in the broadcast, you can just kind of feel it reverberate through the stadium. Like, you can hear like the A's fans just muttering to themselves, like, what did I just see? And Terrence Long just kind of gets up, like he can't believe how easily he was thrown. I mean, it wasn't even close. It was a strike, and Terrence Long was still like 4 feet from the bag. It had to be an amazing throw, but he made it. And so anyway, just a lot of things in that eighth inning really kind of foreshadowed just what an amazing season it was going to be.
Well, I mean, Morgan's like, yeah, he batted 342 in Japan, and he'll probably do that here in the MLB, but not the first year. Suzuki ended up hitting 350 on the year. Gets a bunch of infield singles, including against Randy Johnson in the All-Star game, beating him to the bag in the first inning there. What was most riveting to you about like the latter stages of the season?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, going into the All-Star break, they're already, I don't know, I want to say it was like 38 games over 500. So even if they go 500 the rest of the season, they're still going to end up with like 100 wins and go to the playoffs. So it's just a question of, I think about this stuff very conservatively always. I think, yeah, you can't just maintain that level. There's going to be some regression to the mean. And so they'll probably finish with like, they might finish with like 105 wins or something. But they really matched the same level the rest of the season, to get to that 116 number, which is just really an astounding achievement. Um, yeah, and just the arc of the remainder of the season, it just gets really strange because the September 11th attacks happen late in the season, and the season goes dormant for I think a week, and then that's a huge traumatic event for the whole nation. but as a Mariners fan, it comes with this kind of extra awfulness in that um, after September 11th, everybody in America, I want to say we all feel like New Yorkers, but there's a deep sympathy for the city and
Yeah.
what it has gone through and what it is going through. And so now, like where the Yankees have always been the evil empire, and even though if you can't match their budget, at least you feel like you have people's sympathies when you're playing against them. That's kind of disappeared this year, and it kind of feels like the whole country is pulling for the Yankees. Um, to I don't know, not that winning a baseball championship, makes up for like the true horrors of what happened on that day, but just to bring some light and some happiness to a city that had just been through so much. So that really colored kind of the last couple of weeks this season, and there was just kind of this foreboding going into the playoffs. Like, yeah, it's a good chance we have to end up playing the Yankees again, which the Mariners did, and then they lost 4-1 in the ALCS. So it kind of played out in a way. It was kind of like the worst way possible for Mariners fans. And then interesting, so the Yankees go to the World Series, but then they lose to an Arizona team that I think Randy Johnson wins 3 games in that series. He wins 2-6 as a starter, and then he comes back the next day in Game 7 and gets the win in relief. And strangely, he shares the World Series MVP with Curt Schilling, who in my mind wasn't nearly as impactful on that series, and who is also a huge jerk. So Randy Johnson's lovable. Yeah, he left Seattle on reasonably good terms. There's a lot of love for Randy, and I think when Ichiro took number 51, he actually called Randy to make sure it was okay or whatever, and all this stuff. So I don't know. Randy is still very much loved in the Pacific Northwest in a way that Alex Rodriguez can never be.
Yankees, yeah, as depicted in Moneyball, come back against the A's and win in pretty miraculous fashion, while the Mariners also have their own comeback against Cleveland, go down 2-1, losing 17-2 game 3. Game 4, big home run by Edgar Martinez in Cleveland. And then you got Kaz Sasaki cutting through the Cleveland order. Tommy, Alomar, Vizquel, Luis Gonzalez to close out both those games. Was there some comfort in the season not ending in the World Series, losing the Yankees, but the way the Mariners rallied in the divisional series and fun players on that team that had great performances?
Maybe, I don't know. It kind of cuts both ways because, like you're happy, almost relieved is a better word that they've been able to dispatch Cleveland. But that game 3 where they just absolutely get pummeled. That also, I don't know. That also felt like, and maybe it's just in retrospect, but that also felt like, wow, if if they could do that to this team, then I don't know. It just felt like a really vulnerable moment, and it made you doubt. I don't know, like are we going to be able to get away with having a game like that against like the Yankees, for example? So I don't know. It just kind of cuts both ways. So like the playoffs themselves, even though they do rally to win that divisional series. The playoffs themselves are not a great memory for me. I just remember, I always just try to think 116 wins, and that's where I try to leave it, because just to kind of think of the way things played out, particularly after September 11th, it's just a lot more painful because the Mariners, they never get back to the playoffs after that, right? They go on to post 90+ win seasons in a couple more of those prime Ichiro years, but they don't get back to the playoffs and didn't even make it back until 2022. Team is looking all right now, but yeah, there's such a long kind of dreary history of Just I don't know, like suspect personnel decisions and things that didn't work out the way they were supposed to, and squandering Felix Hernandez, who in his prime for 4 or 5 years was an absolute ace, just never put any pieces around him. So yeah, I don't know. The 2001 postseason is not a great memory for me as a Mariners fan.
Escape against Cleveland, and then against the Yankees, losing 3 of those first 4. Those 3 losses, 5 runs combined. I feel like another shoe is going to drop with the offense. As you mentioned, Brett Boone. Like before the April 11th games we're talking about, early in the season, they had a soundbite from Lou Piniella saying, "Oh yeah, we lost A-Rod, Griffey. We have to have a lot more distributed run production." Out of nowhere, Brett Boone says, "Hold my syringe," and from the 5 spot, just leads the league in RBIs out of nowhere. Something within the rules, I assume. But but then the offense just kind of runs out against New York there, and Andy Pettitte. Did it feel like the shoe was going to drop with just how they were able to manufacture offense?
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's hard to analyze these things. Like there's a team that wins 116 games, probably almost by definition, got lucky in some ways because that's such an outlier achievement. And there's a way of looking at like run differential, like runs scored and runs against, and doing what they call like the Pythagorean theorem, where you can convert that into an expected win total. And I think the Mariners' Pythagorean expected wins for based on the run differential was like 109. So they got like 7 more wins than they should have. 109 is still a lot of wins, and maybe there's some more luck in there. Like maybe the ball bounced the right way more often, but 162 games is a big sample size, so I wouldn't put too much into that. But yeah, you always had, I don't know, maybe a little bit of sense that this is great, but this team can't possibly be this good. Like we're gonna hit a slump at some point, because they didn't really have a slump all year. I'm sure you can go through the schedule and find places where they lost 3 of 5 or something like that, but they didn't have like losing streaks. They didn't have times where it felt like the season was on the brink of falling apart. It just didn't really happen until they lost 4 out of 5 to the Yankees in the series that counted the most, right? So I don't know. By the time you get to the end of the season, you're buying into it a little more, so you're not necessarily waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it's almost more like the psychology of Mariners fans. You just, and maybe there are a lot of teams out there that feel like this, but post 2001, the Red Sox get the monkey off their back, and the Cubs do as well. So every team that feels hard done by, it seems like ends up eventually getting their glory, and it just hasn't happened. It hasn't come anywhere near happening for the Mariners yet. Like what other team that's been around as long as the Mariners has not even been to like the championship series? Like I don't even know like what the answer to that is across professional sports. So that's grim. But I don't know, that's kind of like
it might be the Browns.
Yeah, maybe. Are
the Mariners the Browns?
Yeah, maybe the Mariners are the Browns. Maybe they need to move to Baltimore and then have like a new Mariners, but then that probably won't help at all. So I don't know. Yeah. So maybe some of this is all in hindsight, or it's colored by the 23 years since. But yeah, kind of in hindsight, it's kind of like, yeah, like whatever the worst, most disappointing thing is what's going to happen. But you probably didn't really feel like that at the time. You probably felt like anything was still possible.
Late July, early August, the road trip Detroit and Cleveland back to back. They drop 1 in each, but then recover. What would you give to be able to go back in time and actually have some they did still have rail, not high speed, but you get between like Detroit and Cleveland, just to be able to like fly into Detroit and then take the rail for like a Detroit series and a Cleveland series, just like they do in the Acela corridor. What kind of delight would that be to follow Ichiro and the
Yeah.
116 win Mariners?
I keep thinking about it in terms of like divisional realignments, because then, if there was like a Great Lakes division, you could do Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati, something like that, if those connections
Toronto.
existed. Yeah, up to Toronto. Yeah, and there's like a whole like Chicago kind of hub network you could do with like the Brewers and the Twins and the Cardinals, and um yeah, and even in the Pacific Northwest, just because there's only ever been like the Mariners as a major league team. In Major League Soccer, which is a much younger organization, which I think is it's always interesting because they kind of get to choose which franchises. Like Major League Baseball, like there are a lot of franchises that are kind of grandfathered in, that are now smaller markets than they used to be. They're Rust Belt cities that are in decline or have just been surpassed by faster growing Sun Belt cities or West Coast cities. MLS kind of got to start from scratch and say, hey, yeah, we can put a team in Austin, we can put a team in Salt Lake City, we can put a team in I don't know, San Jose or whatever. And there are three Cascadia teams in Major League Soccer. There are the Whitecaps up in Vancouver and the Sounders in Seattle, and then the Timbers in Portland. And kind of famously, there's a strong rivalry there. And the Amtrak Cascades, which is not a high speed rail system, but it is um, it's a pretty good service that runs several times a day between those cities. Actually, not all the way up to Vancouver. I think you still have to transfer to a bus, but it's famously a good way to get between the cities for those big rivalry matches. They call it the Cascadia Cup, and whoever wins like the most points out of their matches against the other two rivals is kind of declared the Cascadia Cup championship. And there's always a little bit more there's a little bit more juice on those games, just because I don't know, like a certain kind of person just genuinely hates the other teams. Like I'm not like a hate person. Like but a lot of people are. A lot of people just get off on going up to Seattle. Like this is coming from me, who lived in Portland during the rise of the Timbers franchise and their admission to MLS. But there are a lot of people who just love riding Cascades up to Seattle and just hating on Seattle in general. Like it's even cultural. Um, so yeah, like I would love to see that. I don't know what the prospects are for getting Major League Baseball in Vancouver at all, I would say, or Portland, which I think is more likely. But that would be a cool connection to have.
Conferences or leagues that aren't geographically dependent, it's not east and west, do you think these make for opportunities, build up these like intercity rivalries where you go to each other's towns and have more of that excitement around the sport like you see?
Yeah, and you definitely see this in the leagues overseas, like taking the train between cities in the UK to go to away matches in the English Premier League is a big deal. It's a big part of the culture. And obviously the US is a much more spread out country, which is, I think, I don't know, like I think that's why well, because originally there was the World Series because we had two different leagues, right? But also because the U.S. is rather large, most, I think all of the sports have like unbalanced schedules. Like in the English Premier League, you play everybody else exactly twice, so it's balanced. That's why you don't need playoffs. Um, in the U.S., like you play an unbalanced schedule to minimize the inconvenience and expense of travel. So you play the teams in your own like geographic division or conference more than you play the other teams, which creates an unbalanced schedule. And that's why I understand that's why you have, that's the logic behind why you have playoffs. Um, but yeah, I think there's a long tradition of there being an American League and a National League, and of them having like different rules. Which I don't know, is that even true anymore? I'm not even sure if there are any rule differences between the leagues right now. And kind of the opportunity they're missing out on is there isn't this. They're trying to build on it by adding more interleague games, but there isn't this natural rivalry between the A's and the Giants that there should be, because one's in the American League and one's in the National League. Same with the Mets and the Yankees, same with the Cubs and the White Sox, same with the Angels and the Dodgers, and so like that, just like the intra-city rivalries that could exist are like an argument enough in themselves to think about realigning everything. But then like the intercity is also super interesting. Like the Padres and the Angels should be more natural rivals. Like the Angels are the closest franchise to the Padres, but for years they never played each other at all because they were in different leagues. And likewise, I don't know. Well, it used to be that the Cubs and the Brewers were in different leagues, and now it's the White Sox that are in a different league because Milwaukee got moved from the American League to the National League. So there are all kinds of these opportunities for to really put a lot more intensity and juice into matchups that where that doesn't really exist because there's no history of it, and they don't play each other enough, and they're not in the same division, and so you don't get that. When you're in the same division, you're competing for the division championship. Like those games are much more meaningful because you're not only getting the win for yourself, but you're putting a loss on the team you need to put a loss on. And so they're just always bigger games. So yeah, I think there's just a ton of potential for, I don't know, like you'd have to toss away some tradition. That would hurt. And baseball is more about tradition than any other sport in the U.S. And I understand that, but also like there's a lot to be gained in thinking about like whether you could actually realign along geographic lines. So I think it's something worth thinking about.
This has been another episode of Remember That Game. Please rate, review, subscribe, and check out more episodes.